All right, good evening everyone. Nice to see you. Nice to have our Zoom group growing and everyone with us. We are 8:01, we're starting sharp and on time. This week we are starting Parashat Vayikra, which is also the beginning of the book of Leviticus. Leviticus is a very interesting word. It has Latin roots, very similar to the word Levite, because the truth is this book does speak primarily about the Leviim and their service in the temple, as well as the Kohanim, which are both part of the Levite tribe. That's why this is called Leviticus, loosely translated, or Vayikra, which is the very first word in the Torah portion and in this book. This is the third book of the 5 books of Moses. I just want to mention that this week's class is sponsored for the merit of a refuah shlema of Yechia Gad ben Simcha, as well as Elana Yochevet bat Yael, and as well as Nader Shlomo ben Miriam Nanajan, who all need a tremendous refuah very, very quickly. Speedy refuah shlema. Unfortunately, they all have contracted COVID-19, and hopefully they should shake it off as quick as possible, be healthy and safe, amen v'amen, amongst all others who do need a refuah shlema for the COVID-19 coronavirus. B'ezrat Hashem, that all Jews and all human beings around the world will all be spared and saved through the learning of our weekly Torah portion and our Zera Shimshon class that we have weekly. So everyone can say amen to that. By the way, you are allowed to say amen to a live class. Just like if you're on a telephone, you're allowed to answer amen because it's happening at that moment. However, if it's something which is recorded, you're not allowed to. So those of you who are listening in on Zoom, we can all answer amen to that amazing prayer, that heartfelt prayer, that everyone who needs a speedy recovery of refuah shlema should have it. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. All right, now we are starting with this week's Torah portion. We're going to go to the very first verse. I'm going to share with everyone the first verse so we can all follow along properly. Does everyone see the verse, first verse, Leviticus 1:1? Give me a thumbs up. All right. So the book starts with Vayikra el Moshe vaydaber Adonai elav me'ohel moed lemor. Very easily translated. And he, obviously God, called to Moses, and the Lord spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying. We're going to get to verses 2 and 3 in a little bit. However, the Zera Shimshon quotes the Midrash, and the Midrash is on this very first verse, telling us the following: that a Torah scholar, a Talmid Chacham, as we've mentioned in many other classes why they're referred to as a Talmid Chacham, not for now, but a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar that has no da'at, as we'll soon understand what that means, knowledge, unfortunately is in a worse state than a dead carcass. Very, very serious. In Hebrew it's called a nevela, a dead carcass, and a Torah scholar who has no understanding, no da'at, is worse than a dead carcass. That means the dead carcass of an animal. Very, very interesting Midrash. And the Midrash finishes off by saying, our proof is going to be from Moses. Moses, for the fact that he waited to go into the Mishkan, into the tabernacle, after being commanded to make it, and he actually assisted and gave the mandates for the building, he waited to go to the Mishkan until God called him to. That's the proof, the Midrash says, that a Torah scholar who has absolutely, or has no understanding, no da'at, is worse than a dead animal. Very severe. And the Zera Shimshon says he has 3 prominent questions. Before we get to the questions on this Midrash, okay, we are going to analyze the difference between 3 words which are very easily interchanged, but we have to understand what's the difference between them. The first word is chokhmah, the second word is bina, and the third word is da'at. They're very, very interchangeable, however they each have specific differences. Chokhmah translates to be wisdom, and we'll explain what that means. Bina refers to knowledge, and dat is understanding. So what's the difference between wisdom, knowledge, and understanding? So I don't want to say that all the Torah sages agree on the interpretation I'm about to give. However, and when do they, right? But, however, this interpretation is going to be one that we can very easily understand, and that is going to be as follows. Chokhmah means wisdom. Chokhmah means something that a person... Okay, Yael wants to say hi. Hi. Chokhmah means... Chokhmah means wisdom, and that means something that somebody learned from someone else. You learned something from someone else. That is Chokhmah. That's wisdom. Now, the next is Dat. Dat means, Bina. Bina means knowledge. The knowledge that a person gets from discerning two different types of concepts, that's what we call Bina. Dat is understanding. Understanding is when you figure out something, when you come to a conclusion, when you create your own novelty, that is what is understanding, Dat. It's the highest level. There's Chokhmah, then there's Bina, and then there's Dat. The reason why I'm giving you this background is in order for us to understand that the Midrash says Dat, understanding, which is that greatest level, is what is actually lacking from the Torah scholar, and then he's likened to even being worse than a dead animal. Clear? I hope I didn't overcomplicate it, but it's important that we get that idea down of Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat. Now, the Zera Shimshon asks a series of 3 questions to understand this Midrash. The first question he asks is, how is it possible that a dead animal's body can be greater than a human being? Or greater than, obviously, a Torah scholar? That's question number 1. Question number 2. What's the proof that the Midrash is bringing from Moses? How is it that Moses didn't come into the Mishkan, into the tabernacle, before God called him, and therefore we learn that a Torah scholar without any understanding is worse than a dead animal's body? That's question number 2, meaning what's the proof from Moses? Question number 3 is, how is it possible for there to be a Torah scholar, a Talmid Chacham, that has no dat, that has no understanding? Does that make any sense at all? Obviously not. If the person is an acclaimed Torah scholar, he has to be, or she has to be, learning, and that, in essence, is adding towards their understanding, towards their Chokhmah, Bina, and specifically their dat. Okay, these are the 3 questions that Shimshon asks, and we're going to answer them along the beautiful way that he presents this answer. He starts off by telling us a piece from the Talmud. The Talmud in Masechet Sanhedrin, page 92, says as follows. It says that one is not allowed to have mercy. We're not allowed to express or show mercy to somebody who has no dat, who has no knowledge. No understanding. Okay? Sounds very, very severe at first. We're going to explain it. Talmud continues and says as follows. We're not allowed to even give bread to somebody who has no understanding. Third, a person who has no dat, who has no understanding, will eventually be exiled from where he is living, or she is living. These are 3 negative things that the Talmud says about someone who has no dat, no understanding. So, before we get to our Midrash, let's try to understand this piece of Talmud. What does this mean? Aren't we supposed to show mercy and compassion and help everybody? Maybe they don't have understanding yet. Maybe we can help them. Maybe we can teach them. So listen to what the Maharsha explains. The Maharsha, on the Talmud, one of the foremost commentaries on understanding many, many complex issues in the Talmud, he says as follows. You have to go back to right before this part of the Talmud. What was it speaking about right before? It said as follows, that a person that has knowledge, or rather understanding that, will be successful, will be wealthy even. A person who has dat will be wealthy, the Talmud says, right before the three things we just mentioned, negative things that you do or that you don't do for a person who has no understanding. And he says, what is that? What does one have to do with another? If you have understanding, you'll be successful and you'll be wealthy. And you don't have understanding, you won't be successful, you won't be wealthy. What does one have to do with another? So listen to what the Maharsha explained. He explains a fascinating concept. He says, a person comes out and they're going into business, or they're in business, or they're working for somebody, and they're working hard. And the person has one of two options while they are doing that, while they are working. They can either keep on working hard, looking for results based on their own efforts being put into it, expecting success based on their knowledge, their wisdom, their capabilities, or they can turn to God and seek help from God, request help, pray to Hashem for their success. The second of the two is a person who has understanding, who understands that God is in their life and God is in control of their life and He has the key to our success. The first person is limiting themselves. The first person is lacking understanding. They're lacking the understanding that God has the key to their success, that it's through God's help that we actually succeed. Yes, we have to put our efforts into it. We need to put our brains into it. We need to do everything we can to be successful. However, when we put our trust, when we put our understanding in ourselves and we're lacking that understanding that it's really God who's helping us, that type of person is unfortunately helpless. So that's what the Talmud says. Although we need to give mercy to everybody, but that person will not have mercy because their understanding is kochi ve'otzem yadi, that it's my strength, that it's my brains, my wisdom that's going to get me through this. And that's false. And that type of person we shouldn't even give bread to because it would be giving bread to waste. And that type of person, unfortunately, will eventually be exiled from where they live at this point. With this, the Zera Shimshon answers the Midrash. Again, what did the Midrash say? The Midrash said that a Torah scholar without wisdom, I'm interchanging the words, a Torah scholar without understanding, unfortunately, is worse than a dead animal. So the Zera Shimshon said, how could a dead animal be any better than a human being, let alone a Torah scholar? What type of proof was it from Moses that he waited for God to bring him into the tabernacle? And number 3, what does it mean that a Torah scholar can be possibly a Torah scholar if they have no understanding? So the Zera Shimshon answers the third question first. He says, you know what it means, a Torah scholar that has no understanding? And this is the Torah scholar that's worse than a dead animal? He says the Torah scholar is the one who's supposed to know at first, at most, that God is in control. That the person has to turn to God in prayer, seeking help. A Torah scholar means somebody who learns the Bible, learns the Mishnah, learns the Talmud, learns the halacha, the Jewish law. But it doesn't mean that they fulfill everything. A true Torah scholar does. But an academic scholar that learns Torah not necessarily applies what they learn to themselves. Now, I'm not saying any Torah scholar is perfect. Everyone is trying. But there's the intention of learning and fulfilling, and learning and living up to those standards in morals and ethics. And there is unfortunately the standard or the mindset of someone going and saying, no, we're not going to. This is just another academic exercise, another subject, God forbid. That type of Torah scholar, the Zera Shimshon says, that type of scholar that does not connect his understanding to his deeds, his understanding that God is in control, God created the world, God created him. And he's just avoiding that. And he's saying, I won't pray. I don't need to pray for my success, my health, my well-being. That's a big mistake. That's a person who has no understanding. They're disregarding all of the Torah learning and knowledge that they have learnt. All of that hard work and time spent into toiling and learning Torah study. All that understanding is left behind unless, as the Zera Shimshon puts it, a person turns to God always. Not only in their time of need, but all the time. And this is the first answer. The answer to How could it be that there's such thing as a Torah scholar that has no understanding? It's a Torah scholar who does not practice his understanding, who does not turn to God for prayer. Rather, you know what the Zera Shimshon says? This type of person says, I deserve it. In the merit of my good deeds, in the merit of my Torah learning, in the merit of my connection with God, He owes it to me automatically. The Zera Shimshon said that is a gross mistake. It's a big, big mistake. And it's one that we should never find ourselves trapped into. We're going to get to it when we get to the lessons. That's the first answering how could there be a Torah scholar that is worse than a dead carcass. Next, the Talmud tells us in Masechet Shabbat, page 108, the difference between elsewhere in the Talmud also says what the difference between a trefa and a nevela is. So, a trefa, or as we like to say taref, means a kosher animal that was slaughtered incorrectly. There are specific 5 primary laws to slaughtering an animal, and if all 5 and all of their intricacies are not upheld and fulfilled, then that would constitute the animal to be non-kosher for consumption, and therefore deemed as a taref or a trefa. A nevela is different. A nevela is a kosher animal that was not slaughtered. It was found dead. That type of animal has a very specific law. That type of animal's hide is permitted to be used to write holy scriptures on them, such as tefillin and even a Sefer Torah. The klaf, as we call it in Hebrew, that very interesting leather type of parchment that we write our Sefer Torahs on, our tefillin, our mezuzot on, that needs to come from the hide of a kosher animal, but it can even come from a nevela. That means the kosher animal which was found dead. However, the Talmud also tells us that the nevela, the animal that is found dead, is greater than an animal that is slaughtered. A kosher animal found dead is greater than a kosher animal that was slaughtered. This is what the Talmud says. So, the Iyun Yaakov, which is also a commentary on our Talmud, he addresses this and he explains how could it possibly be that a kosher animal found dead is greater than a slaughtered kosher animal. Slaughtered kosher animal could be eaten and also used as hide. However, it's as follows. Everything God does for us is precisely calculated, perfect for us. We believe it, we understand it. Do we live up to it? You see, this nevela, this dead carcass, as the Iyun Yaakov and the Zera Shimshon also explain, understands its fate and accepts it. What's the fate of a nevela? The Torah tells us, I'm going to share the following with you. Look at the second one. It's Exodus 11, verse 7. It says, Ulchol b'nei Yisrael, lo yecheratz kelev leshono lemi'ish v'ad be'ema leman tede'un asher yafle Adonai ben Mitzrayim uben Yisrael. Translated, but to all the children of Israel, not one dog will wet its tongue against either man or beast, in order that you shall know that the Lord will separate between the Egyptians and between Israel. This was when the Jewish people left. They left Egypt, and God told all of the dogs not to bark on their way out. We had earlier this year, we had a whole class on that. Does everyone remember? All of our regulars? We went into great depth what it meant that all of the dogs did not bark at the Jewish people when they left. Since they did not bark and they fulfilled the commands, they went against their nature, they fulfilled God's request, God rewarded the dogs. They rewarded the dogs that all dead carcasses, lakelev tashlichun oto, we shall give them to the dogs as gratitude for them to eat. Can you imagine an animal that dies, left as a dead body, accepting the fact that its purpose was for its hide to be used to write Sefer Torahs and Tefillin and Mezuzot, and its body, its flesh to be eaten by dogs for the gratitude that we owe to dogs. The gratitude that God and the Jewish people owe to dogs. This carcass, this dead animal, says the Zera Shimshon, has more faith than anybody, including a Torah scholar, that questions God and does not understand and put his understanding into God and turn to God in their need of help. And turn to God for every moment. This is how the Zera Shimshon answers his first question. How could a dead carcass be greater than any human being, and all the more so a Torah scholar? Because a human being or a Torah scholar who does not put their understanding into work, who does not understand that they need to turn to God at all times, you're worse than a dead animal, because the dead animal knows its purpose and accepts it, and accepts that its reward is that at least the Torah is written on its hide, but its body is not being consumed with a blessing and by Jews, rather by the dogs. The worst thing that a Torah scholar or anybody can do is not activate the understanding that they have of God and put it into motion at the times of need. To answer the second question, and that is, what type of proof do we see from the fact that Moses did not come to God and come to the Mishkan until God actually called him? Vayikra Moshe, and God called out to Moses. So this, the Zera Shimshon answers, and he says, out of all people, out of all prophets, who has the most merit? Who would be able to come and claim, God, give me the merit, allow me to come, reward me for the good deeds that I've done? Obviously Moses. But he didn't, said the Zera Shimshon. He was just waiting until God will call him. And that is the proof that the Zera Shimshon says the Midrash is using for Moses. Moses did not claim that he was entitled to anything, entitled to coming to the tabernacle, entitled to any position, anything that he's ever done. On the contrary, Moses was the most humble, and he waited for God to call him. And that is the proof against a Torah scholar who does not have the understanding to be patient and not rely on their own merit. There's 3 different lessons from this first segment of the Zera Shimshon that I wanted to extrapolate on, and then we're going to move on to the second segment of this evening's Torah class. The first is for us to remind ourselves what understanding really means. Understanding is not in quantity, rather it's in the deep content of what we know about God, and what we know about how true we are to be in our faith and our belief, our trust in God, to turn to Him in our times of need and turn to Him in all times. This is something which comes from a great amount of understanding of God through learning His Torah, but it also comes with maturity. Only a truly mature person is able to put their faith and their trust in God. A person who understands that everything comes from God, that it is not our actions, our deeds, our wisdom. That's just us doing the motions, putting in our hishtadlut, our efforts. Deep, true understanding comes from maturity and putting it into action and learning the Torah so we could know who we're putting our trust into, and that is obviously God. That's the first aspect I wanted to speak about. The second is, nobody, not even the righteous people, not even tzaddikim or tzadkaniyot, can ever come and claim from God, reward me for my merit. That is in the world to come. But in this world, nobody can come to God with a feeling of entitlement. It's something which we all take way too lightly. We all feel entitled at first by our parents and our grandparents to give to us, to spoil us. We feel a sense of entitlement from our teachers, from our siblings, from our friends. When we realize that no one owes us anything, then we start appreciating what comes our way. When we realize that God doesn't owe us anything, we have no entitlement plan with God. We do have an insurance policy. And the insurance policy is that when we study Torah and we fulfill the commandments and forge a relationship with God, That's our greatest insurance policy that does have a payout date. But we're not allowed to say, God, give it to me. It's when God will call you, Vayikra el Moshe, when God will call you, just as he called Moses, will be the time to receive the merit and to receive the reward. We have to get out of our minds this idea that God owes it to us. Just like anyone owing it to us, no one owes you anything. And when your expectations are low, you're able to appreciate everything. I think in this time of this rampant pandemic that's putting everybody on their toes, not at ease, we took life for granted. We took things that we take for granted and we assumed them to be there. We're getting too comfortable and complacent with that. Some of us, not all of us. I don't want to say everybody. But the simple things like school, many of us take for granted. I can guarantee you. Now I'm on both ends. I teach at school, and I also am a parent. Any parent who is going to come with a complaint to school when school is back in session, as administrators and as teachers, I believe we don't need to even answer. Because there's so much to complain about, of course. But do we ever, as parents, stop and think, wow, how amazing it is that these professionals are able to not only teach our children, but at least entertain them, keep them busy, when we need so much to get done, when we need that precious time. How many people were just in the middle of probably complaining towards teachers and parents, and teachers and administrators and schools? Stop. Yes, we take for granted that every child should be in school, but we should not. And the same goes for so many things that we do. I know some of my greatest friends are golf players. They go on a daily basis, and the golf courses are closed. Oh, we've taken that for granted. Not anymore. And so too with the tennis courts, and the gyms, and the restaurants, and so many other things that we take for granted are just not there, or not there in the same way anymore. I mean, even today, I went to fill up my car with gas. And I keep on reminding myself the days that I used to fill up the car with my bare hands. And now I have a bunch of plastic gloves in my car that I slip one on and fill it up and press all the buttons with, and then I throw it out. These are things which in yesteryear we never thought about. However, today the world that we live in is evolving and it's changing. And things that we took for granted, things that we thought we were entitled to, are no longer there, and they're different. And I think this is just a recalibration that God is doing to each of us. And that is, we need to stop and think. We need to appreciate our loved ones. Thank God I don't know personally anybody who passed away from this coronavirus, but I can guarantee you, for those people who unfortunately did lose somebody, they are stopping and thinking, how much more time can I spend with that person, with that loved one? What about that last powwow I had with them? Maybe it was over nothing important. So us, who thank God are still alive and well, we should cherish our family, cherish our loved ones. Don't take it for granted. Don't feel entitled to the fact that you are married and that you have children and possibly grandchildren and a roof over your head. Everyone takes it for granted that you live in a house. Well, hopefully the economy goes right back up, but unfortunately you may be hearing stories of people who are being evicted from their homes. God forbid, hopefully it doesn't get there. But these are things we have to just be thankful to God for, and turn to God in our time of need, and turn to God in our time of triumph and success, acknowledging that it comes from Him. The third aspect of this lesson that I wanted to share was the idea that the Iyun Yaakov said, that even the dead animal understands, is that everything God does is for the good. Even when we don't understand it. In the long run, it is for the good, I promise you. I'm going to give you two amazing stories the Talmud tells us. These stories are so powerful, so profound. I hope that you remember them, and I hope you share them with your children. First story, and they're both in the same theme. The first story is that of Nachum Ish Gamzu, very, very famous individual. His name was Nachum, and he was coined the nickname of Gamzu. Gamzu was a abbreviated version for something he would always say. He would always say, Gamzu Latova. This also is for the good. Everything that happened, positive, negative, he understood it, he didn't understand it, it looked parv, it looked like it was nothing special. Everything he said was Gamzu Latova. This is also for the good. It's a great way to go about life, right? But he lived it. He understood it. His dat was activated on that concept. So listen to an amazing story. This story can be found in the Talmud, Tractate Ta'anit, page 21a. And I'm going to give you an abbreviated version of the story, and it goes as follows. Many, many years ago, when the Jewish people were living in the land of Israel, and the Romans were ruling over them, they unfortunately got wind that the Roman emperor was angry at the Jews. And they decided as the Jews that they need to elect a certain individual, a saintly, capable person, to go and appease the Roman emperor. So they all thought to themselves, who would be greater than our saintly Nachum Ish Gamzu, who again always said Gamzu Latovo. This is Tova. This is also for the good. So they asked him, and they told him that he was the one selected. Do you accept this qualified position? And what was his answer? Take a guess. Gamzu Latova. Yes, I guess this is for the good, so he'll do it. And so it was. The Jewish community gave him a chest full of gold and jewels. And they told Nachum, take this to the Roman emperor and tell him this is a token of our appreciation and our commitment to you, and to make sure that there is no evil decrees that are stirring up in your mind and in your politics against the Jews. So he does so. Traveling and traveling, traveling, and the night before he gets to Rome, he stops off at a local inn, and he sleeps there overnight. And just like most of these stories always continue, guess what happened at the inn? Well, somebody sneaked into his room, two thieves sneaked into his room, looked around his things, found the box, opened the box, all silent. Nachum was sound asleep, took all of the jewels and gold that was in there, replaced it with sand, so it would still have weight, and closed it back up as if nothing happened. Nachum gets up in the morning with no realization of any of the mischief that these two thieves committed. He goes to the Roman emperor, and he brings it to him, and he tells him, this is a gift, an offering, a blessing from the Jewish people to the state of Rome, and specifically to you, our emperor, a sign of our great commitment to you. Oh, the Roman emperor was so happy. He said, out of all days, today's my birthday. And you're giving me a gift on my birthday? Oh, I'm so happy. I'm ecstatic. He tells his men to bring the case in front of him. He opens the chest and he sees sand. Now Nachum doesn't know this. He's feeling like, okay, I'm doing what I have to do. The emperor digs his hand in the new sandbox. He lifts it and he says, how dare the Jews disgrace me as such? And he lets the sand trickle through his fingers back in. And at once, in great anger, he says, take that Jew and lock him away. And Nachum at that point said, Gam zu letova. This also is for the good. He finds himself in jail, and then he is told that his sentence is that he is going to be killed. Capital punishment by the Roman emperor the next day. And he heard that news and he said, oh, it's got to be for the good. Gamzu Latova. That evening, the king was preparing to go to sleep, and none other than Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, appears to him in the guise of one of the king's servants. And he comes over to him and he says, "Your Majesty, you surely don't think that the Jews would ever make fun of you and send you just sand? I suspect, my king, that maybe this is the same sand that their forefather Abraham used to defeat his enemies." You see, in the book of Genesis, the Torah tells us about Abraham picking up sand and throwing it at his enemies during the very first world war civilization has ever seen. That's when the 4 kings fought against the 5 kings, and Abraham was stuck in the middle. He picked up some sand, he threw it at his enemies, and the sand turned into arrows and swords, killing their enemies. Eliyahu Navi, who looks like one of the king's servants, is saying, maybe this is a secret weapon, and this is a gift that he's giving you, that the Jews are actually giving you. The king said, "Oh, there's no harm in trying it. If anything, it would just be an amusing tale to tell my constituents." So the king goes, and he takes this sand, and he activates it in war. And miraculously, when they threw the sand, all of their enemies, they were actually in the middle of a war at that time, all of the enemies fled away at once. At that moment, the king goes over and he says, "Pull out Nachum out of the jail. Bring him." When he was being taken out, Nachum, he said, "Gamzu Latova, this gotta be for the good." He's brought in front of the king, and the king says, "I apologize for the misunderstanding. Thank you for this gift." The king took all of that sand, kept it with him as a new secret weapon, and he filled up the chest full of gold and jewels, and he sent him off back home. So Nachum's on his way home. Listen to the end of the story. Very interesting part. And Nachum, again, everything that happens, good and bad, Gamzu Latova. He's going back with gold and silver and jewels. Gamzu Latova. It's got to be for the good. He's on his way back, and he stops up at that very same inn. And he checks into the room, and the father and son were very surprised to see him again. And they asked him, "How was your visit to the emperor?" And he said, "Gamzu Latova." It was all for the best. It was all for the good. And he went to sleep. The two just couldn't understand, because they were the 2 thieves. The innkeeper and his son were the thieves themselves. And they thought to themselves, what could it possibly be? How could it be that the emperor accepted his sand? And they came and they asked him, "What did you give to the king?" And he said, "Well, to tell you the truth, I gave him a chest, and it was full of sand, and he accepted it. And he used it at war, and he told them the whole story, how it was miraculous." And they thought to themselves, wow, we could become rich. What they did was they went and they started digging up plenty of sand. They filled up a new big chest, and they went themselves from the very same place. They took sand from the very same place they took the first time. And they went to the emperor and they said, "Your emperor, we have a gift for you." He opens it up and he said, "It's sand." He said, What's going on over here? 2 gifts of sand?" They said, "Yes." The innkeeper and his son said, "Yes, this is the same type of sand from the Jews. It actually came from us." The king said, "I have to test it out." The king tested it out, and it wasn't the same. It wasn't miraculous. And those 2 were killed at the hands of the king. When this story came back to Nachum, he again said, "Gamzu Latova." This is all for the good. And he understood that they were the 2 who stole the gold and jewels and replaced it with sand. The purpose of this story is to teach us that there's so many things in life that look good or maybe not. And life is, in truth, a roller coaster. Nevertheless, we could never forget that God is orchestrating this whole journey. Every up and every down, sideways, upside down, straight up, whichever way a person feels, emotionally, physically, psychologically, financially, everything is for the good. When a person starts living life with this understanding, this dot, that everything is for the good, life changes drastically. our trust is put in God. I want to tell you, I'll say it a lot briefer, and this is the story of Nahum's very own disciple. We have a very famous Talmudic scholar, more of a Talmudic personality. His name was Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva only started learning his Aleph Bet at age 40. You know who his teacher was? Nahum Ish Gamzu. And you know how great of a teacher Nahum Ish Gamzu was? The Talmud at the end of Tractate Brachot, page 60b, tells us that Rabbi Akiva was used to saying the following: Kol da'avid rachmana litav avid, which is Aramaic for everything God does is for the good. And the Talmud recounts a very interesting story. It's a famous story, and again, tell this story to your children. It's a lot shorter though, but there was a time that Rabbi Akiva himself was traveling from one city to the next, and he had almost nothing on him. And he comes to the host. He comes into the city, he knocks on the door, and he asks, please take me in. The host said, I can't, we're not taking in guests now. He goes to another house, not taking in guests now. And every time he said, everything that God does is for the good. So he takes the little things that he had, which was nothing but a candle, a rooster, and a donkey. And he says, okay, if no one's going to host me in the city, I'll go camp out in the field or in the forest. He goes to the forest and he starts preparing a place for him to sleep. He saddles down the donkey. He calms the rooster down, and he has his lamp, where he was obviously learning Torah with. This is Rabbi Akiva. He's there, and all of a sudden a strong wind comes and blows the candle out. So now he's 2 for 3. And then a cat comes and eats the rooster. Now he's at 1 for 3. And the unimaginable, the unthinkable happens, and a lion comes and eats his donkey. And now he is left with 0 for 3. Well, he still has himself, so he's 1 for 4. Let's put it that way. And every single time one of these tragedies happen, he's saying, Kol da'avid rachmana litav avid, everything God does is for the good. Who he learned from his Rebbe, Nahum Ish Gamzu. He falls asleep. The next morning, to his dismay and his taken aback, he's shocked by the fact that he wakes up and he sees that entire city looted and destroyed. And he wakes up that next morning saying, now I understand why God didn't want any of those hosts to host me. And I know why God didn't want to have a candle. Because he didn't want me to be in those houses. He didn't want the looters or the robbers or the thieves, the bandits, to see that candle and come out after me. Nor my rooster bray or chicken, or the rooster crow or the donkey bray, because if that would have happened, then unfortunately they would have seen me. And for those reasons, he said, all of my losses were really my great gain. When we start understanding in life that what we have is a gain, and what we don't have is also a gain. Why? Because it is God's will. This is the end of the first segment of the Zera Shimshon. We're moving on to the second. The second is going to be based on a verse. I'm going to share it with you now. This is the second verse in our Torah portion. Right here at the top of the page. Does everyone see? Daber el b'nei, it's Leviticus chapter 1 verse 2. Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem. Speak to the Jewish people, telling them, Adam ki akriv mikem korban ladonai. When a person amongst you is going to come and sacrifice to the Lord, mina be'ema, mina bakar, mina tzon, takriv et korbanchem. It's going to be from animals, from cattle, from the flock you shall bring your sacrifice. Rashi on this verse explains that Adam is a very particular vernacular to use when referring to a person. Normally we use the word ish. Ish is a person. Ish is a man. Adam is also another way to say a person or a man, but it's different. Rashi is trying to understand why the difference, and he explains as follows. He says Adam is referring to, reminding us about Adam Harishon. Adam, from Adam and Eve, yeah? Remember that episode? The very first in the Torah? Saying as follows, the same way that Adam did not bring his sacrifice to God from something that was stolen, so too you. Make sure you bring a sacrifice to God, but something that belongs to you, and not something that you took from someone else. This is what Rashi says. Now, before we get to the Zera Shimshon's two great questions on it, I want to share with you what the Talmud says about Adam HaRishon. This is the Talmud in Masechet Avodah Zarah, page 8a. It's a very, very interesting piece of Talmud, discussing different things about Adam HaRishon, and says as follows. Just to give a little bit of background, it's been a couple of months since we learned Genesis. Adam was created at the end of day 6 of creation. God did that precisely in order to gift the whole world to Adam, but also to make Adam realize that he did not create it. It was really God that created it. Adam is a creation, not a creator, at first. And then, when God gave Adam the world, he said, okay, now you become a creator, but in a humanistic form, not in a godly form. Then, after Adam was created, Chava was created, Eve. That was right before they ate from the tree of knowledge. So Adam was created, Adam was created, Eve was created, then Shabbat came, they were scared, and, okay, let me just get it clear, sorry. Adam was created, Eve was created. Before Shabbat came, they ate from the tree of knowledge. Okay? Sorry for the confusion, because I'm just following the Gemara at the same time. When they ate from the tree of knowledge, they got very scared. We know the whole episode over there. Then what happened...
But I put that up, I heard the rabbi talking.
What happened was that after they ate from the tree of knowledge, Shabbat came in. That very first Shabbat, the sun did not set. However, Motza'ei Shabbat, Saturday night, the sun set for the first time for Adam and Eve to view. The Talmud says when they saw the sun set and the world getting dark, they got very scared. They got so scared, the Talmud says, that they thought that this is their punishment. That darkness is going to come and the world's going to revert back to tov avo, to nothingness. At this point, the Talmud says Adam goes and he sits in fast and crying all night long. And Chava did the same. They were thinking, how could we have possibly done this to the world? The morning comes along and the sun rose. When the sun rose, they realized, this is just the way of the world. Every day the day starts with the sun rising, and then the day ends with the sun setting. And Adam gets up, and he brings a sacrifice to God. This was on Sunday morning. So if anyone ever asks you, who was the first person to bring a sacrifice to God? It was Adam. And it was Adam because he realized that God had forgiven them. Of course, there were some punishments, but he forgave them for the eating of the tree of the knowledge. And he brought a special sacrifice. That sacrifice was actually a ox that was created during the 6 days of creation, whose horns were huge. And Adam brought this sacrifice, thanking him for accepting his apology, even though it was a delayed apology. Based on this, okay, so I just told you that background for you to understand Adam HaRishon's Korban. The Zera Shimshon addresses Rashi and says, Rashi, why do you need to bring a proof from Adam HaRishon that he brought something that was his and not stolen? We have a verse that tells us this, that the Talmud itself learns from. The verse is Leviticus chapter 1, verse 3. It says, Im ola korbano mina bakar zachar tamim yakrivenu. If his sacrifice is a burnt offering from cattle, an unblemished male he shall bring. the Torah says, Im ola korbano. Korbano means your sacrifice. See it over here? I'm highlighting it. See that? The word korbano means your sacrifice, his sacrifice. The Talmud teaches us that from here we learn that when you bring a sacrifice, it has to be yours. It can't be someone else's. That's a proof that you can't bring something that is stolen. There's another proof the Zera Shimshon says. The verse in Yeshayahu says, Ki ani Adonai ohev mishpat soneh gazel beolah. God says, for I am the Lord who loves justice, hates robbery and a burnt offering. So from there we can also learn that God does not want us to bring a sacrifice from something that's not ours, something that we stole. So Zera Shimshon says, why is Rashi saying we learn from Adam, and Rashi is taking the word Adam to teach us that's from Adam, we learned we should not use anything stolen as an offering to God. Good question. Second question that Zera Shimshon says is, why does Rashi need to tell us? Because the whole world was Adam's. Everything belonged to Adam. Isn't that quite obvious? If Adam was the first creation, well, he didn't sell anything to his wife or to his children, or he didn't deed anything to them yet. It all belonged to him. So question number one is, why does Rashi need to learn from Adam that we should not learn, or that we should not bring a korban, a sacrifice that is not ours and it's stolen? Second is, why does Rashi have to say, because everything belonged to Adam? Listen to the answer to the Zera Shimshon. The Zera Shimshon says the word Adam is not coming to teach us only the simple law of you can't use something that is stolen for a sacrifice, because that we know from the other two verses we mentioned. Rather, it's coming to exclude another case which is similar to being stolen, and therefore it cannot be used as a sacrifice. Listen to the case. The case could be illustrated from a case that's brought down in Tractate Baba Metzia in the Talmud, page 100. And it says as follows. Let's say two people, we're going to use two people, Reuven and Shimon, and they both want to trade. One of them has a cow, another one has a donkey. And the one with the cow's going to trade with the one with the donkey, and they'll swap. However, in the middle of their trading process, at an unknown time, the cow gave birth to a calf. And now each one is claiming the calf belongs to me. The original owner of the cow says, well, it's in my possession, it was given birth to, so therefore it belongs to me, the calf. And the donkey owner says, no, well, you already agreed to sell it to me, and therefore it belongs to me. Since it's uncertain when exactly the time of trade was taking place, and when it was certain when the time of trade was taking place, but it was uncertain when the calf was born, therefore the cow belongs, the baby calf belongs to whoever is holding it at that point, which was the cow owner, the original cow owner. Because, as the Talmud says, there's a concept of hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. A person who wants to take something out of someone else's hand, you have to bring the proof. If I claim that your necklace that you're wearing around your neck is really mine, I need to prove it. If I want to say that that land belongs to me, I need to prove it, because right now you're sitting on it. Right now you're wearing it. So since there's no way to prove exactly at what time this cow gave birth, and therefore, if that preceded or was after the trade of the cow and the donkey, the cow belongs to the original cow owner since it was born in his possession. Based on this, the Zera Shimshon says, that type of calf, which is in a doubt who it belongs to, although Bet Din says it belongs to the first person, that type of calf should not be brought as a sacrifice, because it's a doubt if it really belongs to you or not. And that is what the Zera Shimshon is coming and saying, that Adam, why is God telling us from here, learn from this verse, that we should not use something stolen as a sacrifice, is because, of course, you shouldn't use something stolen, but you shouldn't even use something that's in a doubt of being stolen. Maybe that it's not rightfully, or maybe it's doubtfully yours. So for sure, something stolen you can't use. but even something that is yours, but it was acquired to you in a questionable manner, even though halachically it's yours, that's not allowed to be brought as a sacrifice. The Zera Shimshon then goes on to answer his second question. You see, Adam, when he brought his sacrifice, it was not in doubt if it belonged to anybody. It was 100% rightfully his. That's why Rashi goes on to use the example of Adam, that just as Adam brought a sacrifice and it was his, so too you should bring a sacrifice just like his. Now, I want to bring a very powerful lesson from this concept. And this is a concept which reminds us what's the purpose. Why do we bring sacrifices? Of course, today we cannot bring the sacrifices. We don't have that opportunity. The temple's not built. We're not allowed to make a personal altar and bring a sacrifice. However, in the time of the temple, what was the purpose of a sacrifice? So the Talmud and the Rambam both explain, and many others as well, explain that a sacrifice is there for one of two purposes. Either to atone for something we did wrong, or as a gift offering expressing our gratitude to God. In either one of these cases, the Zera Shimshon is teaching us that the ownership of the gift you are bringing has to be unquestionably yours. If a person wants to come to God, either as a gift offering or as an atonement offering, a sin offering, how can you be coming to God with something that is questionably yours, that maybe you are slighting another person for having it in your possession, in your ownership? Again, it really belongs to you. That cow belongs to you. But someone else feels like it belongs to them, even though it doesn't. But someone has a genuine concern that it belongs to them. How can you come? How can anyone come when you have something and you're offering it to God as an atonement offering, or offering it to God as a gift offering, but there's someone else that feels really bad about it? Someone else who feels that it really belongs to them. And this is something we need to rethink in our lives. Not only what are we doing, because that's very important. You always need to do the right thing. We always try to do the right thing. But why are we doing it? When we start putting things into perspective, when we start putting our deeds, our life into perspective of why are we doing what we're doing, we'll be sure that we do the right thing with the right motives. There is no point of stealing something from someone in order to do a good deed with it. Because by doing that wrong, as the Talmud says, that deed is not counted. So too, when we do things, we need to refocus the reason why we are doing them, and to make sure that we have the utmost intention, respect, and care for our surrounding and for others all at the same time. It's something which really, really is important. It's something which the Torah is telling us and the Zera Shimshon is making a deal out of. Just as Adam gave to God, and it was fully his, we need to always give to God, but make sure it's fully ours. With this, I want to end. We're creeping up to 9 o'clock. With blessing everybody with the new Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Nisan, according to the Talmud, is one of the two options when the world was created. Either it was tonight, tomorrow, or Rosh Hashanah, the first of Tishrei. There's two opinions only. It's either the first of Tishrei or the first of Nisan. We go with the halacha that it's really the first of Tishrei, and that's why Rosh Hashanah is then. But for many things, as the beginning of Masechet Rosh Hashanah explains, Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the new year for different things, such as the years of a king, starts from the first of Nisan. So tonight is Rosh Hashanah. The Arizal gives a fascinating interpretation. He says, really, Rosh Hashanah is both. It's not only the first of Nisan, and it's not only the first of Tishrei, it's both. On the first of Tishrei is when the spiritual creation took place. God had the intention to create the world. He started planning it. And it actually came into fruition, into reality, on the first of Nisan, which is tonight. tonight and tomorrow. It's a time for renewal. Every Rosh Chodesh is a time for renewal, but Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of a new year, is also a time for renewal, time to rethink our deeds, our actions. But this Rosh Hashanah is very specific, and that is also the beginning of the month of our freedom, our salvation, our exodus. Of course, in 2 weeks from now is Pesach, when the Jewish people, our great nation, was freed by God. And something very special happened just a year later. And that was the inauguration of the tabernacle. The book of Leviticus is going to speak about the service in the tabernacle, right? The last part of the book of Exodus was creating the tabernacle. And now we're going to get into the service of the tabernacle. Guess what? Its very inauguration took place tomorrow morning, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So I just want to give everybody a little bit of a background of how this took place. After the creation of the tabernacle, as we mentioned last week, finished on the 25th of Kislev, which was the first day of Chanukah, to be, everything was on halt, and Moses waited for God to call him. God called him on the 23rd of Adar, which was a week ago. And he had Moses every single day build the tabernacle, do all the service himself, like the Kohen Gadol, and then take it down. Next day, the 24th of Adar, build the tabernacle, do all the service, take it down. And the 3rd day, and the 4th day, and the 5th day, and the 6th day, 7th day also. He took it down on the 7th day, which was today. And tomorrow morning on the 1st of Nisan, he tells him, okay, now that you showed Aaron and you showed the world how to do it, now call Aaron and his sons and have them do it. Pass the mantle over to them because they are the priests. You were just doing the trial run, showing everyone how to do it. And these are now the 12 days of the inauguration of the Mishkan. Every single day, starting tomorrow, was another one of the Nesi'im, the princes, all representing one of the tribes who came and brought and they sponsored the service of that day. Of course, it was Aaron and his children that did it, the Kohanim did it, but it was sponsored by each of the Nesi'im, each of the princes from each and every tribe. It is customary. So wait, before that, I want to show you. So if you see here, this is coming in 2 parashas from now, Parashat Shemini, Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1. It says, Vayhi bayom hashmini kara Moshe la'aron u'levanav u'zikrei Yisrael. And it was on the 8th day that Moses summoned Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. When was that? That was tomorrow morning. The 8th day, meaning after the 7 days of inauguration, the 8th day was the first day of the... after the 7 days of the practice run of Moses, the 8th day was the first day of the inauguration. And that was when Moses passes over the mantle. It is customary, starting tomorrow morning, to do 2 things. Number 1, to read the portion of that prince, of that tribe, that is specifically found in Parashat V'Ha'alotcha. It could be found in Numbers. In Parashat Naso. It can be found in Numbers chapter 7. Numbers chapter 7 is the dedication of the inauguration of the Mishkan. And it starts by Vahi Bayom Kalot Moshe La'akim et HaMishkan. And then the whole first part, read the first Nasi. The first prince, that is what's read tomorrow. Day 2, we read the second. It's a lot shorter. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We read all 12 of them. And that takes us till the 12th of Nisan. On the 13th of Nisan, we read the beginning of Parashat Be'alotcha, and that's the lighting of the candles of the menorah. And that finishes our service of the commemoration of the dedication and the inauguration of the Mishkan. That's the first thing we should do. The second thing is, right after we read that, we should take 3 coins. It could be 3 pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, whatever you want to use. And every day take those 3 and set it aside. Don't put it in charity yet. Take 3 coins on the first day, second day. Okay? By the end of the 12 days, you'll have 36 coins. Then you're going to add another 3 the following day, which is the 13th of Nisan, and another 3 on the eve of Pesach, the 14th, and that's going to give you a total of 42 coins. Those 42 coins are to be given on charity on the eve of Passover with the in mind of two things. Number one, the 42 letters in the Ana Bekoach, the 42 words in the Ana Bekoach, I'll share that with you. Ana Bekoach Gedulat Milcha, right? That whole phrase, you have 6 verses with 6, you have 7 verses with 6 words each, and that gives you 42. So each word is corresponding to each of those coins, as well as the 42 places of travel that the Jewish people traveled when they were wandering in the wilderness, in the desert. And therefore, we give those 42 coins. So these are two things that we should do. Set aside every day 3 coins, keep it on the side. On Sunday, you'll set aside 6 because you're making up for the Shabbat one, right? And every day, even on Shabbat, you will read the portion in the beginning, in the middle of Parashat Naso, which is Numbers chapter 7 is where it starts. Any of you have any questions on it, you can ask me, and that is something that we should do. So I'll end up with a blessing to the whole world, to all the Jews, to all those who are in need of a recovery, for everything, and specifically for this coronavirus, that we should be blessed in the merit of the Zera Shimshon, blessed in the merit of this Torah study, and want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. If there are any questions, we'll take the questions. Thank you, and stay tuned for tomorrow night. We are getting back to the Haggadah at 8 p.m. 1 second.
Thank you, Mama.